sending Doug Ford onto Fox News to show them that we're not messing around up here. And we're going to send Danielle next. Maybe we won't send her. Maybe we'll send Danielle. No, maybe we won't. We won't send Danielle. No, it's a bad idea. Forget. Strike that. Strike that. Just ignore that back there.
Liberal Leader Mark Carney at a rally over the weekend talking about premiers appearing on Fox News to advocate for cross-border diplomacy. He said he says it would be a bad idea, quote unquote, to put Alberta Premier Danielle Smith on the network. Ontario Premier Doug Ford brushed off the comments this morning, saying Carney was just joking around, but Smith took or had a different response.
Well, I've noticed this with progressive men, how much they talk about how much they support women until they meet a strong conservative woman. And the attitude is, sit down and shut up. Well, I don't shut up. I make sure that Albertans know exactly how I feel about issues.
The front bench is back to talk about that. Dan Moulton, Shakir Chambers, Carl Belanger, and Laura Stone. Laura, you are in Alberta right now. I know you're covering a bunch of stuff, including you're at that press conference where the Premier made those comments. How is this going over there?
It didn't go over too well with Danielle Smith, as you could see from the clip. She was all too happy, I think, to answer that question. Look, I think I would characterize it as a bit of a loose moment for Mr. Carney. I think it's almost like he forgot the cameras were rolling and he was just joking with his friends. And I think it does kind of hurt perhaps the statesman-like position that he holds himself in, and talking about uniting Canada. Whether this is going to have some great effect on the campaign, probably not, but I think it does showcase how there is no love lost between Danielle Smith and Mark Carney, particularly on Danielle Smith's side. She talks at length about the feeling of Western alienation, Albertans feeling like they haven't been listened to for the past decade, and the concerns in this province about whether, what would happen if the Liberals form a government again. I think kind of what's most interesting here, and we talked about it at the press conference too, was the distance that she's taking between her past comments about Pierre Poilievre being in sync with the Trump administration. She made those on Breitbart News. She's now totally distancing herself from those comments, saying that that's up to Mr. Poilievre to comment on, which doesn't really make any sense because she's the one that has said it. She's tried to take herself out of the equation now, and I think there's probably some realization, to put it mildly, among conservative circles that has not helped Mr. Poilievre's cause when this election has become so much about Trump and who is best placed to take him on. And Mr. Poilievre tried to position himself as the firm defender of Canada in the face of these threats. So I think that kind of dynamic shift was kind of the most significant change coming out of Ms. Smith's press conference today.
What do you make of that shift? And I should point out that there's a conservative rally, and these rallies have been, Carl, very well attended, outside of the base of their support, outside of Alberta. I can only imagine tonight it'll also be headlined or special guest appearance by former Prime Minister Stephen Harper. Your thoughts on Premier Smith kind of creating that distance at this moment in time?
Well, it's too late. The damage has been done. I mean, going down to Florida, talking about how we need to elect more Trump allies into Canada in reference to the Conservative Party of Pierre Poilievre. That's the things that, the Premier said that helped Mark Carney and the Liberals. She is Pierre Poilievre's worst enemy in this situation, and, maybe distancing herself right now won't have the impact that she hopes it will have. And in fact, the threats to national unity that we've seen in the past few days and the remarks that she's made and other, like Preston Manning, that also reinforced the feeling that, we need to vote for the Liberals because these guys are not going to be good for us. They're not going to be good for the country. We are afraid of them. And so you just feed that narrative over and over again. Contrast that with Doug Ford, who's, just working as well as Premier Smith for his constituents, but he's not immersing himself in the federal campaign. I think that was a better reaction, and it would have no impact on this case.
Although, to be fair, Doug Ford's constituents are very different than Danielle Smith's, right? The population, Shakir, in Ontario is much more open to voting Liberal by and large, and that could, I don't know what's going to happen in 3 weeks, but historically much more so than in Alberta.
Yeah, I mean, and you're seeing what happens in Ontario. I mean, they got so much support for the EV industry to get those plans to the province. I think you have to understand in Alberta, they do feel very disrespected by not allowing to build their resource and get their resource to market. And you have to appreciate that, right? Even when you're talking about someone like Mark Carney, like I said in the last segment, talking about emissions caps, Smith has been pretty clear that, that's kind of a non-starter in these conversations. Bill C-69, she's been pretty clear that she doesn't want that legislation in place. So I can understand why Alberta feels disrespected. And I think even just having a comment like this, at the end of the day, Mark Carney is a sitting prime minister. It's pretty unbecoming for a prime minister to behave that way towards another premier, right? It kind of just erodes this notion of, this guy's just this sober, serious kind of statesman. You remove the script from him and he can just be easily as nasty and as divisive as his predecessor. So I think this portrayal of Carney, kind of being above partisan politics is just not true.
It is interesting, Dan, and I'd love your thoughts on it, because I think, for so long we're used to a world in which it was to Justin Trudeau's political advantage to be at odds with Danielle Smith or Jason Kenney, at the time, or conversely, it's in their political interest to be at odds with the prime minister when it was a Liberal prime minister, and both kind of took advantage of it. Do you think that Canadians are analyzing it differently, through a different lens right now, because this moment feels like above politics in a way?
Well, I think that has the potential to be true. I'm not sure in this case it will have that impact on a part of the electorate that's going to make a deciding impact on Election Day. I'll say two things about this. One, a lot of Conservatives were sharing this clip last night and online and had similar perspectives to the one Shakir introduced here. The biggest knock on Mark Carney throughout this campaign, that he's too scripted, too wooden. He's not really going to be good at the the hustings and out there. I actually saw this clip and thought, oh, he sounds like a normal guy. Like, he sounds like a normal person, right? Which I think a lot of voters would react to the way he was joking about it in that way, in the same way Doug Ford did today. And by the way, I thought his comments about Doug Ford were complimentary, not negative. That was my takeaway on it when I first saw it. But the second thing is, to your point, Vashti, I think, like, in the parts of the country where Liberals need to perform well, in Ontario, in Quebec, and even, frankly, even in British Columbia, I think this plays pretty well to a lot of voters that are important to the Liberals. And I don't think that they're big fans of Danielle Smith. And the reality is, this is her third or fourth incursion into this campaign. And every time she stumbles in, she makes it a worse day for Pierre Poilievre. And I don't think we've seen the last of it. I think this will continue to happen to him throughout the campaign, where, she'll make him, I think, look a little small, given the perch she's on as a premier when she enters this campaign. But she also knocks him off his message in places where he needs to gain new voters. He's already got all the voters in Alberta. He's got to find new ones in other parts of the country, and she's making that job a lot harder for him every time she stumbles in. And I think the Liberals will work to keep this in the media cycle in the days ahead.
Well, certainly, Laura, they're definitely, like, you see that the media avails. Mr. Poilievre is consistently on the receiving end of questions. Hey, what do you think about what Preston Manning said? Is that going to happen? He has to say, he says no, for sure. Like, he responds in a way that would appeal to voters outside of Alberta, but just the very fact that he has to be answering those questions, I imagine, speaks to what Dan is outlining.
Yeah, and he's asked constantly why he's so much like Trump, and I'm sure that's extremely frustrating for him and the Conservative team when they have been pushing this message throughout the campaign of, we need to stand up for Canada, we need to make ourselves a stronger country and diversify. We've heard from Conservative strategists like Corey Tonight, who's on the show, that Mr. Poilievre did not do that early enough in the campaign, that even his slogans have been too similar to Mr. Trump, and whether that's conscious or not, even in this press conference today, I think Mr. Poilievre was talking about building big, beautiful projects, and you could almost see, like, the Liberal attack ad creating itself out of that. So there is a perception, whether it's fair or not, and I'm sure a lot of Conservatives would argue this is not fair. Poilievre has been pushing for Canada to be a stronger nation for, throughout the last few years under the Trudeau government. And now because of his tone and his manner and how he has presented in the past, how he's treated the media, they're now having to face these constant comparisons. And so I think it is a difficult challenge for him. I think he is trying to fight it, and I think he is tried to come out as stronger out of the gate, unprompted, talking about Donald Trump and the chaos he's created, as he did today, tried to take a stronger stance to try to nip those comparisons in the bud with 3 weeks left to go in this campaign, and to really put that to rest and to bed.
Okay, I got to nip this in the bud for a commercial, so I'll leave it there. Thanks, everyone. Our wonderful front bench, Dan Moulton, Shakir Chambers, Carl Belanger, and Laura Stone.